Hello, and welcome to M4LU, presented by Moms for Liberty. We're here to translate complex topics into more easily understood content, giving you, the parents, grandparents, and every American citizen, the key facts and information you need to empower you to fight back against government overreach, especially as it impacts our kids in schools. Hi, I'm Melissa Karwowski, Program Director of M4LU. Each month, we'll focus on a single topic, ideology, or issue that impacts our kids, schools, and communities. We'll approach it from multiple angles, starting with a 101 intro lecture, followed by a 102 course that goes a little deeper on the topic. If available, we'll do a virtual watch party of a film relating to the topic, and finally culminate with a monthly book club discussion. Best of all, every event will have live Q&A with experts in the field to help us make sense of it all. We understand this can be a lot to digest, but don't worry, we've got your back. You'll find a corresponding toolkit in the resource library at m4lu.org. In addition to recordings of all monthly events, each toolkit will include a curated smart book, presentation slides that can be used at chapter meetings, related white papers, articles, podcasts, and so much more. Now, before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Depending on what device you are using, there should be an audience chat and Q&A feature at the right of your screen. Please comment, interact with your fellow audience members, and be sure to submit those questions to our amazing guests. It is so valuable to get this direct interaction with them, so please take advantage of it. As a warning, rude or demeaning comments will get you removed from this event, and you will not be permitted to re-enter. Now, of course, the legal reminder that the opinions of the guests and any media content shared are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of M4LU or Moms for Liberty. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please like, share, and subscribe to help spread the word and support our mission. We try to keep our resources affordable and accessible to all, but if you would like to donate, please visit m4lu.org. Thank you again. Now let's jump over to the event. Hello, and welcome back to M4LU. In May, we have been learning about comprehensive sexuality education, or CSE. Now, as we've learned so far in CSE 101 and 102, this is actually far from what most people think of when they hear the term sex ed. It is sex ed, but sex ed for social change. It is an intentional agenda to restructure society. The foundation of today's sex ed was laid on the so-called research of Alfred Kinsey, which we learned a little bit more about in CSE 102. And it is proactively pushed by Planned Parenthood, CCUS, and the UN, as you'll see tonight. The War on Children exposes this horrible curriculum that seeks to undermine the family and sexualize children. So thank you again for joining us tonight. And without further ado, M4LU is proud to present Family Watch International's The War on Children. All right, welcome back. I have to say, as overwhelming, very hard to watch as that information is, I love that it ends on such a positive note because this is up to us and we can fight back, which I have been promising is one of the key things that we will be talking about tonight with our guests. So I'm going to start by welcoming our first guest, which is Sharon Slater. She is a powerhouse in the global movement to protect marriage, family, and life. As president of Family Watch International and former head of United Families International, Sharon helped grow support from just 1,000 to over 400,000 people across the globe. She's led advocacy teams at the United Nations, authored the influential book Stand for the Family, and launched initiatives that have reached over 1 million people in 12 African nations with life-saving HIV/AIDS prevention education. Sharon is also a mother of 7, including 3 children orphaned by AIDS, and her work is driven by both personal conviction and a bold international vision. So please help me welcome Sharon Slater, who, by the way, is joining us from Turkey, right?
Yeah. Yes, sorry, don't have that great of a connection, so I won't turn on my video. But yes, I'm in Turkey right now at a conference on the family by the government.
That is amazing. I have to thank you so much for taking time to join in the middle of the night to speak about this and from across the other side of the world. That's pretty awesome. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa,
And
for having me.
Our next guest is another fantastic speaker who's going to help us out. It's Audrey Werner. She's a passionate advocate for protecting children and the founder of the Matthew 18 Group Ministry. With a background as a sex educator in Michigan, she has dedicated over 2 decades to educating parents, pastors, and church administrators on the origins and impacts of sex education. Audrey's journey began when she noticed alarming trends in child sexual activity and abuse, prompting her to research and expose the flawed foundations of modern sex education. So, welcome, Audrey Werner.
Thank you for
Hello.
having me. Hi, thank you for having me.
Very, very glad to have you here. We have some powerhouse women here to help us on this incredible help us figure out some ways to fight back in this very, very important fight. One of the things I've had as takeaways from this film, which again, I just love that it ends on such a positive note because so much of these topics we address here at M4LU can really feel very dark and overwhelming, and it's good to know that we can fight back against it. I think one note that I'm sure we'll touch on later, but I find it incredible how deceptive this is. It seems like everything from the left is so good at co-opting language and making things sound so good. Like just the term of abstinence plus, but then you find out abstinence, it's not really abstinence as we would think of abstinence, abstaining from sexual activity. It is all of these other things that technically count as abstinence. That to me was really shocking. And even more so, I think, is the parental consent. The fact that these things can happen, this information can be given to children without parental consent. It's just horrific. So I have to start out and ask, how did you both get into this? Like what led you to create this film, Sharon, and how did you end up in this battle?
Well, thanks for that question. It actually happened when I went to the country of Mozambique and I met these three orphan children, and we ended up working towards their adoption. And as I was going back and forth to Mozambique, it took us 6, 7 years to adopt them. I One day my daughter Amelia came home from the school in Mozambique with this graphic awful picture on how to have anal sex and oral sex under the guise of doing it safely. And I'm like, she was only 9 years old. And I
Oh my
was I
goodness.
was shocked that they would give her something like that. And then I started, as I was going to different African countries, looking at a HIV/AIDS prevention program we were implementing, and I saw that in the orphanages and in the schools, they were actually pushing this radical sexual agenda onto children. And I started investigating it and learning more. Then I came back to my home state of Arizona, and my daughter came home. My biological daughter came home with some radical graphic information about sex that was coming in her English class, no less. And I started seeing it everywhere I went, and this led me to start to study it and find it, and now we found it all over the world. And we I was just at a conference in Kenya, and before that at a conference in Uganda, and there's not a place in the world I go where I can't find where they've been pushing this, either in the schools if they can get away with it, or the out of school programs if they can't, to try to hide it, or through whatever means they can. It's such a radical agenda.
That is, you touch on something really important there that I know we're going to get to later on, the out of classroom topics. But Audrey, your experience is actually, you did teach this at one point. Is that correct?
Right, right. I started teaching this when the AIDS epidemic was beginning in America in the 1980s, and that propelled the organizations that have been listed in the film to really push for sex education because an AIDS epidemic, you get it through sex. So, my gosh, we have to get to the children. We have to teach them about oral sex and anal sex, which was not normal back in the 80s. That was not commonplace, other than in the LGBT lifestyle. So we were told abstinence was a myth, and we were told parents aren't doing their job, so we have to go in there and do it for them. So I did that for 5 years. And then in 1991, I had had my first child and I couldn't work full time anymore. I wanted to work part time. So I worked part time in the sexually transmitted disease clinic. So I was actually seeing the fruit of the labor, because I knew by that point we were doing more sex ed than we'd ever done in our country. And I was watching the more sex ed we did through the years, the lower the age of first sexual contact, the normalization of having sex outside of marriage, the date rape was exploding. And I thought, wait a minute, sex ed was supposed to help with the STDs and the pregnancy, and it's actually making it worse. So that's how I got into the deep dive. And Judith, who was in the film, is the one who trained me on the origins of sex education. And from there, it's been a wild ride.
I have had the pleasure of watching quite a few of, just as part of research for this, of interviews from you,
Mhm.
and been able to see a lot from Judith as well. And she was really seemed like an incredible woman to have dedicated her life to fighting this. And
Mhm.
you say something very interesting there that I want to ask both of you right away, because I feel like this is always one of the biggest arguments that I get as soon as I bring this topic up anywhere. And it's this, you called it the myth that parents aren't doing this. They aren't talking to their kids about it. So we have to, the educators have to. So this is still a common argument that I hear, literally, just like I said, talking to anyone in my circle.
Mhm.
How do we push back against that? And is that actually true? Are there all these kids that have no idea about sex at all?
Well, I would answer. Actually, I talked to Judith about this, because parents do have difficulty talking about the graphic explanation of, going into graphic details. And my parents struggled, so I was given a book. It was the first Christian sex ed book written, and it actually was, sad to say, when I went back and looked, it was based on Alfred Kinsey, Hugh
Oh
Hefner,
no.
and Planned Parenthood had a say so in the program, which is true with all sex education, whether it's Christian or secular. And so, anyway, I asked Judith, I said, why is it that parents have such a difficult time talking to their kids graphically about sex? And she thought for a moment and she said, Audrey, when you talk to children about sex, you sexualize them to themselves, to adults, and to each other. And she said that is why parents can't do that. And I thought, sex education was meant to take away the moral innocence of our children. And I heard it in the film talking about sex abuse, in a way it traumatizes children. I remember when I first was exposed to the sex ed program, my mind as a child, I can go back to when that happened and how traumatizing it was. So parents are meant to protect their children. They are not meant to sexualize their children. So that is why parents have such a difficult time. And if you look to prior to Alfred Kinsey, how did parents talk to their children about sex? It was in a very indirect, moderate way. It was through the flowers, the birds, and the bees. And we
Yeah.
only shifted after Kinsey. So kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Sharon, are you seeing things similarly international? Is is it just America with, I guess, when I did research on Kinsey, it was a lot of the post-Victorian era. So is it our Western society that was afraid to talk about it, or is this what
Well,
are you seeing
we hear
internationally?
the same argument. I call that the bad parent argument. For some reason,
Mhm.
Oh,
everybody falls for it all across the world. No, they'll use in Africa, they'll say, "Oh, well, we've had taboos about sex. Your parents can't teach you about sex. So we're going to come in here and we're going to teach you about sex so that you can protect yourself." And let's learn. I mean, I've studied so many CSE programs and analyzed them, and they all have the same pattern. They'll have the same kind of activities where they'll say, let's talk about sex. Let's now put up every sexual word that you've ever heard and let's put it up on the board. And now let's discuss every sexual act, every sexual slang word. What they're really trying to do is do the opposite of what parents would do, and that's desensitize children to sexual things. Now, if you think about that, they're saying, okay, there's bad parents out there who aren't teaching their children. So that's why you need us to teach your children. But what they're not going to just teach your children. That's their excuse for sexualizing the children and desensitizing them. These exercises that they put them through in comprehensive sexuality education programs have been compared to what the FBI says are the ways that you groom children. You desensitize them to sexual things. The exact very main principle that they try to get across in comprehensive sexuality education. So, first of all, it's like saying, let's add fuel to the fire because these parents, supposedly these bad parents, aren't giving enough information, and then they overload you with the fire hose of way too much information. What really should be done is maybe just helping parents have, guiding parents in how to do these things. It's been proven that when parents get involved in sex education, children are less likely to have sex, they're more likely to protect themselves. And so the parental involvement is the key element of a successful sex education program.
Think that right there is one of the big lies in society that has been pushed is that parents, it's like the breakdown of the family, really, is what it seems to come down to. That parents should just stay out. You don't really have any influence on your kids. You're stupid. You're not hip. You're a boomer, whatever. Like you can't possibly relate to this generation. And if you're not a good parent, is someone who's just going to be a friend, and that's really not what we're supposed to do as parents. And I think that I like the name of that, the bad parent argument. I think it ties in April we talked about gender ideology, and that was something that came up, was the idea of uh, saying that school counselors were like the safe, or teachers were safe people to talk to, implying that parents were not safe to talk to with any questions about that. And it's those underhanded, kind of deceptive messages, that implicit messages, that are really unfortunate. That is, well, it's unfortunate to say, but it's not too surprising, I guess, that it's really a worldwide thing. This seems like a humanity problem with human nature,
Now,
unfortunately.
I should add that in Turkey here, it's really interesting. They haven't had sex education in the schools, and they have way less problems with sexual issues. I mean, because it's
Wow.
not being thrown on the children too early. It's not being thrown on them at all. And so you can take Turkey as a good example.
It's awesome, actually. That I think I think it makes sense, because as soon as well, I think you say it in the movie, right? That as soon as a child is exposed to these images, that's imprinted on their mind, it sits with them, it stays with them. So it's going to, if nothing else, then they have these devices that you can look up anything, and now you have
Yeah,
answers to
and the
things.
other bad parent argument, they take these devices and they say, well, the children are going to learn. They're learning it anyway, so now we have to teach them even more about it, right? No,
Yes.
just because they're getting too much of one thing doesn't mean we need to give them more of too much of one thing, if that makes sense.
I'm so glad you said that, because that is another argument that I don't think of as often, but that is exactly right. That, oh, well, they're going to hear it anyway, so we might, it's like, what is it, that kids are going to have sex anyway, so we should just give them condoms, which to me is just insane. But I know that is a big argument that is used. So I appreciate you bringing that up. That's really important. Okay, so I know we have a bunch of questions already from our audience, so I will ask our wonderful moderator to bring up our first question, please. All right, what is the justification for including sexual pleasure in early CSE lessons when research shows young children aren't cognitively or emotionally ready for such topics? That one, I just have to say real quick, I was horrified when I saw that was being pushed, the idea of pleasure for young children. I think that's awful.
Well, I
Well,
would
and
say
I think I would say, and I know Sharon's got a big answer for that one. But sex education, it boils down to, it is grooming. It is grooming children for sex. So it's used by pedophiles. It is used by a society now that believes Kinsey, that children are sexual from birth. So the fact that they would use that is to groom all children for child sex trafficking, for sex with adults, sex with each other. There's an intention behind that. It's not that they're just haphazardly doing this. There's a plan behind that.
Yeah, Planned Parenthood is the premier. I don't know if most people don't know in the U.S. that International Planned Parenthood Federation is the mothership of Planned Parenthood, and they have 60,000 service points in 160 countries. You know, they're global, and they're the main mechanism through which radical sexuality education is pushed everywhere, and they're the big purveyors of the importance of teaching sexual pleasure to children. If you go to our website at stopcsc.org, we have a list of 15 harmful elements that we have found are usually in most CSE programs, and teaching them about sexual pleasure and how to obtain sexual pleasure is a key component of sex education. And their philosophy at Planned Parenthood, they actually say that children, in their Exclaim publication, you can find it online, that children are entitled to sexual pleasure, and having different forms of sexual pleasure are important to their health and well-being. So they believe if they're not having sexual pleasurable experiences, that they're not having health. So these people,
Wow.
just hearing that, you can imagine how twisted and I
Yeah.
guess corrupted their minds are, and then to push that onto children. And that's exactly what we see globally in countries all around the world. This is what they're pushing. Let me just give you one of the worst examples, and I'm sorry to bring this up, but I mean, the European Commission's logo is on this, multiple European countries, UNFPA's is on this, but it's a manual for out of school children, because they probably can't get it through the schools because the schools won't teach it, to Zimbabwe children, all the way in Africa, if you can imagine. And what it does is it slowly separates children from their parents' values by teaching them values relativism and telling them they don't have to have the same values as their parents and their religion. They can choose their own values. And by the way, there are sexual values that everybody agrees to. They're called human rights, and they're called sexual and reproductive health and rights. And in order to realize them, you have to have sexual knowledge. And in order to have sexual knowledge, here are a list of about 20 sexual patterns that you need to learn about. And those include voyeurism, exhibitionism, pederasty, sexual
Oh my
pleasure with
gosh.
dead corpses, with feces, with urine. I mean, who in their right mind would even introduce something like that? And that's meant for starting at age 10. This
Oh my gosh.
this is you can go to our website, you can find that manual, you can see it at stopcsc.org. You click on the materials exposed page, and by the way, if you look on the left hand column, that's where the international programs are analyzed. If you go on the right hand column of the materials exposed page, you'll see where the US funded and US distributed CSE programs are pushed, and we analyze them all against the 15 harmful elements. But this agenda is so corrupt, so depraved, so, I mean, this is child abuse, is what it is, really is. And again, this has the European Commission's logo is on it,
Oh
multiple
my.
UNFPA, the United Nations Fund for Population Activity, multiple European countries. I mean, it's beyond the pale of what most people could even possibly imagine is what they think should be taught to children.
That's just that, I mean, it's beyond atrocious. It really is. It's the so I have brought this up to, again, to friends, trying to just talk to my circle about this, because I'm from a bit of an old school, maybe, in that we have friends who we're not in an echo chamber. Like, we have friends who don't necessarily agree with us on absolutely every political point, which I think is great. But it is interesting how many people are genuinely unaware of those kind of topics. I didn't even realize I went to that extreme. That's terrible. So what I'm curious is how can you respond, or how do we respond? Because while it is intentional, and Audrey, I agree with you, it is intentional, it's clear, but clearly there have to be some people who are just tricked into this, and they can't actually believe that this is a good thing for kids, or do they? How do we respond to that?
There are. I mean, and this goes back to good and evil. you know, there is the satanic side and there is the God side, and the people who are involved with this, some of them are, humanist, communist, eugenics, Satanism is common themes among them, and they see nothing wrong with raping an infant. So knowledge is consent. And if you look at it from the legal part, Judith was working on legislation, and that's what I testify for different bills. But it actually says in some of these dialogue between the lawyers is that the American Law Institute would like to, in America, push down the age of consent to 10 years old. And and they use the phrase knowledge is consent. Well, how do children get knowledge on sex? Through sex education, through these programs that were exposed in the film. These are ways, even just the books in the library. Why are the kids bombarded with all of these books in the libraries that have so much sexual content to them? And that's to educate them, because this other side sees no harm in having sex with children. They have totally embraced the Kinsey mindset. And so this is deliberate. They want our children. They want the minds of our children. I think I can't remember if I shared this with you before, but when I was doing my research, I found a book that was written by a woman in 1971. Sex ed officially went into the schools in America in the mid 1960s. The Christian sex ed program I referenced to that I saw as a child, that went into the schools in the late 60s, early 70s. But this reporter, she was reporting on sex ed, what it had done to America already from 1964 to 1971. And she said in one of the sex ed curriculums, at the Time of Your Life series, they predicted by the year 2000 there'd be no more organized religions, and fathers would no longer have a place in the home. So ultimately, these people wanted to destroy, and this is how they do it. They destroy societies where you have to take out the churches and you have to take out the traditional families. Once you've destroyed that, you can easily take over a society. And that's where these people are headed. They want us to be destroyed so that we will all become, one world, a one world order. When you look at the UN and their agenda for this one world order, it's critical that you put sex information in the schools for the children, because this is how you destroy countries, societies. And look at where America's what we were before and where we are now,
Oh
in
yeah.
this area of morality. It's atrocious.
It that
Mitzi,
that
I wonder if we could bring up something too, and that
Yeah.
is, hand in hand with this agenda is the agenda to abolish parental consent and a parental
Yes.
authority or protection
Yes.
over their children. And if you go to stopcsc.org/UNICEF, we did a campaign to expose UNICEF, which is the UN agency that's supposed to protect the world's children. But they have a document up there that you can see about they're actually saying that you have to take away parental consent for sex education, because children have what is called this evolving capacity to maybe become more like adults earlier than the others
Mhm.
might. And so you need to be
Mhm.
able to,
Oh my goodness.
like the Planned Parenthood clinician needs to be able to decide whether a child's capacity has evolved so much that they don't need parental consent for abortion, for contraceptives. So, you're talking about where does such agenda come from? Well, what does Planned Parenthood profit from? Well, all those things, from contraceptives, from condoms, from abortions. We know in the US they're selling aborted body parts. And then now even the hormones. Planned Parenthood is one of the biggest purveyors of
Mhm.
the transgender hormones, which, imagine trying to keep up and maintain your so-called gender by having to take hormones every month of your, every day of your life, or however often you have to take them. I mean, this is a lot of money that is being
Mhm.
made off of sexualizing the children. So you have that one side of the equation. These people are trying to sexualize the children for a lot of nefarious reasons. But as you say, there's a lot of people who get caught up and believe what they're saying. They believe the false and I guess distorted data and studies that they're putting out there that are claiming that comprehensive sexuality education will delay sexual debut. It will prevent teen pregnancy. It will stop, sexual abuse. And there's multiple studies out there that they are pointing to that say it will do these things. Well, we commissioned a $50,000 study to look at the very data that they were citing to make all these claims. And if you go to our website too at stopcc.org and you look at the Defender's Toolkit and you click on research, you will see what they found. And it's just black and white there that you can show that this data, it was distorted and it was reported incorrectly, and that the real data shows that there is no evidence that that school-based comprehensive sexuality education prevents STDs or teen pregnancy. And the opposite, of course, is true. Duh, when you look at the curriculum, that it actually increased sexual risk taking rather than decreases it. But people get confused. If you today are a college student and you have to debate, what sex education is best for children, there's I mean, and you Google comprehensive sexuality education, the lies out there, are so prevailing that you almost couldn't even find our study, and you would never know that these things are distorted, and you would never know. But I think anybody who wants to be in this space and help needs to understand the status of the studies, and they should really go to that stopcc.org, click on the toolkit, click on the research, because we have to keep up with it, because there's always new false studies coming out saying that, for example, the big movement in the world, especially internationally and especially being pushed by the United Nations in Africa and in developing countries, is we've got to stop gender-based violence, sexual and gender-based violence. Well, there was this Goldfarb Lieberman study that supposedly came out and said that CSE will prevent date rape. It will prevent, all these sexual violence. And when we had these experts from this independent entity, the Institute for Research and Evaluation, look at the studies that they cited to make this overall claim that after 30 years, this is what they found of looking at all the data. Most of the studies they cited to weren't even sex education programs. They were sexual abuse programs that had nothing to do about even teaching about sexual acts or sex education or the 15 harmful elements that we find in comprehensive sex education. And even the ones that were didn't even find what they said that it found. And just to add one more thing, right now, this week in Geneva at the World Health Assembly, the world is supposed to adopt the pandemic treaty. Now, in one of the first paragraphs of the pandemic treaty, it recognizes the World Health Organization as the international authority for the whole world, on health issues. Well, the World Health Organization did a study trying to refute the study we commissioned. They worked for 5 years and came up with this huge attack on the study we commissioned. They are steeped in this agenda in sexualizing children. They have a whole division, the World Health Organization does, on comprehensive sexuality education. And many people are being fooled by them, are being looking at their data when it's really totally skewed. And when I hear people talking about the World Health Organization, the pandemic treaty, and that they should be the ones who should be, you know, coming in when there's COVID-19 or these kind of things, all I can think about is if they could get it so wrong on the children that they could be radically promoting to comprehensive sexuality education across the world, how wrong can they be on everything else that they might
Oh,
try to
yeah.
do, like the pandemic treaty? That's just something to think about as the world's about to adopt this treaty, and give a lot of authority to the World Health Organization. Um, there is not a UN agency that has not been corrupted, that's not pushing this agenda, funded by the European nations. It was funded by our um, uh, government under the Biden administration, the Obama administration, the Clinton administrations. In fact, the amount of money going through USAID to push radical, comprehensive sexuality education all across the developing world and developing countries is unconscionable. I mean, it's just, I did a study 6 months before Trump was put into office. We had our director from Africa come and do a congressional behind the scenes hearing to expose, like, we had this situation where, like, Planned Parenthood would be getting a grant for like $100 million. They'd have seven grantees under them. Then one of those seven grantees would get a $50 million grant and have all their friends under there. And they're like this incestuous, you know, amount of funding. So, in any conversation regarding that, we need to look at, first of all, the real data. We have,
Yeah.
we've got the arguments on our side. If you learn about the data, and then we've got to be responsible for our own tax dollars, that was going internationally to this funding, and $101 million annually under the appropriations in the US government and budgeting that's going to CSE in our own country. Um,
So
and
I have to
go
I
ahead.
have to ask real quick. So in addition to this, I see a question in the chat that I want
Yeah.
to get to is because while it's funding for it in the classrooms as well. One of the things you mentioned already is taking this outside of the classroom. And there was I think in the pamphlet or in the movie they talk about this a lot about recruiting educators, peer educators.
Hmm.
That's something that obviously Moms for Liberty's main focus is our mission is really focused on the classroom, but that's scary because that's outside the classroom. That's something. How do we fight back against that? How do you proactively protect your children against something like that?
Well, I was going to say in Turkey, because they can't get it through the regular channels, that's
Hmm.
they've gone underground here through the peer-to-peer education programs. And that's,
Wow.
I think that's more used in other, developing countries where they can manipulate on the ground easily. But what they do also in the developing countries and in the US is the after school programs. They're really manipulating those. And so
Yeah.
that's where you need to really look, is the after school programs, is the clubs that they're able to start. That's their big new avenue if they can't get it openly and directly through your own school districts and your own curriculum in your school during the school day.
Are you seeing anything as far as extracurricular activities or programs, ways that we could fight against that, or how parents could step in front of that?
Well, again, a parent, it's tough to be a parent today because you have to be so vigilant. And I noticed I was looking in the questions, and someone had asked, how this can be in the each state. Are they mandatorily teaching? And we came across a law. It's called the obscenity exemption law, and it was in 43 out of the 50 states, which said that it's illegal if your next door neighbor showed your child pornography, they would go to jail. However, there's an exemption. If a teacher or a librarian shows your child pornography, it is exempt, meaning that they will not be put in jail for that because it's being used for educational purposes. So, of course, that law was based on Kinsey, and I live here in Texas, and I'm happy to say that Texas is now one of those, I think there's 7 or 8 states that have repealed the obscenity exemption. And our Senate and our House, I just testified for these bills. The Senate and the House have voted to repeal this law. So now it's going to our governor's desk to be signed. So
Awesome.
it's in every subject. I mean, they can bring in this graphic information in every subject. So parents have to be very diligent to look at their child's curricula. Now everything's online. So, and I think that one positive thing from the pandemic is a lot of parents got to see what their children were getting, the content in the schools, which was a great wake up call. You have a right as a parent to review curricula, to go into the school libraries and see what type they have. You can go into your public library in your community and look at these, look at the young teen section, and you will be appalled at the amount of sexuality material that is there. So parents have to be very diligent in looking at it. Yes, it's out of school programs. It's even, I have had some of the worst have been the youth pastors in the churches who are like, well,
Really?
we'll take it, we'll do it. And I was a member of one church where they came in and used a program that was based on from an LGBT source. So they came in and used, they said, well, we'll just edit out the parts that, and it's like, well, a little leaven can corrupt a whole loaf. So if we're going to
Yeah.
talk about sexuality with youth, let's talk from the Bible and the Bible alone. If you're in a church, that's where that should be coming from. So,
Yeah, that you hit a really, really important point, which I think most of our, well, I don't know, actually, I don't want to speak for everyone, but the obscenity exemption laws are really, truly the one of the biggest roots of evil for this, in my opinion. I think like we can fight all we want against pulling these things, these books out of school libraries at least, but the
mhm,
fact of the matter is, like when the law says that they can do it, well, we have to change the law. We have to get
right,
that changed. And I think a lot of like
right.
I did not know about that until I'd say semi recently. And that was once I found that out, I was just absolutely floored.
Mhm.
I don't think a lot of people know that. I really don't.
No,
I don't think that a
no,
lot of
They don't
parents
know,
realize
and
that.
Missy, I'd like
stunning.
to, this might be overwhelming for people who are listening and feeling like, like there's no hope. But I would like to let people know that there is a coalition in the US that Audrey's a part of, that we invite, Liberty Moms and any good groups to be a part of. And if you go to protectchildhealth.org, you can learn a little bit about that coalition. And we have monthly support groups. We share each other's ideas and successes, but that's where the big push is amongst our colleagues in various states across the US that are all working to end the obscenity exemptions in their states. And we have a plan and we have groups that are working on that. So if anybody is interested in getting help and support to remove your obscenity exemption, we would invite you to join us at protectchildhealth.org. There's a button where you can, apply to join either as an individual or as a group. Because really, when we all work together amongst all the different organizations working together in coalitions, there's a lot of power and there's a lot of unity. We also have a
Yeah.
summit where we provide training and expertise and speakers once a year as part of the Protect Child Health Coalition.
Awesome. I'm so glad and I'm now going to pivot a little bit because I promised everybody that one of the best things about tonight is that we're going to talk about some ways to fight back, things that we can do, how like some actual solutions to this because you absolutely just hit the nail on the head that this was a very dark month. I said that at the beginning of CSE 101. I was surprised at how dark it was to research this and realize that this is even a thing because to me it always felt like well surely we can all come together and agree that we shouldn't be sexualizing the children, we should be protecting our kids. And then when you realize no, it's actually a very very intentional agenda. It's heartbreaking, quite frankly. So let's take a quick pivot and just talk a little bit about what are some things that parents can be doing. How can we find this information? I know we've got a couple questions about that of like finding the information in schools. What can we do to fight back? We talked a little bit about the obscenity exemption laws and this coalition that we can join to find other help. What are some action items that we can do? What's some positive stuff?
Well, I think the first thing is to be educated, which I commend all of you who are on this, because this is a great way. Because, the scripture, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And we need to be educated on this. Secondly, we have to recognize we are children of the sexual revolution. The revolution was started to destroy America. And it really began in the 1920s, but it was in full force in the 1960s. And I'm going to bet a majority of the parents on here are from 1960 on. I would be 1961. I'll give up my age, but so there. Where do you start? When I speak to parents, I do a talk called "You Can Raise Pure Kids in Today's Culture," and so the question is, well, how do we do that? Because a lot of our generation and younger were, if you understand that all of these sexual messages, imagery, pornography, everything that's out there is to lead us toward sexual sin. So parents will say, I messed up in that area when I was younger. How can I possibly teach my children about purity, chastity, modesty, self control? And that's where, as a Christian, we need to take that to the cross, repent, give it to Jesus, and it's he heals you of that, so you can turn around and then help your child. So I wrote a book called 10 Tips on How Not to Talk to Your Kids About Sex. Oh,
Which
good,
I'm
you
very
got the
excited to
book.
have. Yes, thank you.
And that is on Amazon. So that's to help parents. That was a tool that I had to help parents. And then I would add, you spread the word, because you need to let other people know this. And you do come in a community. Now in Texas, there's a whole host of parents that are going down and testifying. And I started this with, I'm just a mom. Nobody's going to listen to me. And I just started with small groups of parents, and I started sharing the information I know. And then I realized that the Christian sex ed was based on Kinsey. So, my group is named Matthew 18, and that's after Matthew 18, 15 to 17. If your brother's sinning, you go to him. If they don't listen, you go with someone else. Then you take it to the church. So that was where my starting point was, trying to wake up the church to these issues. And I'll say that, when you're like, okay, Lord, this is heavy. This is really heavy. Where do I go with this and what do I do? So, first and foremost, your family, protect your family, and fight for them. They are worth fighting for. This is a global attack on our children, and it is very deliberate in what they're doing. So, I was on my knees saying, okay, Lord, where do I go from here? And he opened some incredible doors where I ended up writing a brief for the Supreme Court, which is on my website. So I got to educate our U.S. Supreme Court justices to, thanks to Sharon, she put a bug in. I was going over to Uganda to speak at a church, and I ended up with a full blown speaking tour because of Sharon. And it happened to be at the moment that Uganda was about to cave because of all the organizations she's talking about. And at that moment, they were about to put sex ed in all of their schools. And I like to say, a mama, with the help of Almighty God, went up against Planned Parenthood International and the UN, and God halted sex ed from going into their schools. So, God, if he can use one mama for Uganda, what can he do with 10 righteous people in America? So don't get discouraged by this. I mean, we are here for such a time as this, and we have got that. Jesus doesn't say in Ephesians 6, sit this one out, because it's too big of a problem. Rather, he says stand, and we are to
Yeah,
stand and fight for our kids. Yeah.
I love
Uh,
that. And you say that, there's a small portion. That's what Seth Gruber was saying last week on CSC 102, that, a small portion is able to really have a huge impact, and that can happen
Exactly.
on the positive side too. Okay,
Yes.
Sharon, sorry. Go ahead. Let me hand it
okay.
over to you.
Well, I guess because you said the word stand, I wasn't going to say this, but I've written a book called Stand for the Family, a call to
Yeah.
responsible citizens everywhere. And you can get it on our website at familywatch.org. But it does take you You said get educated, get informed. Sign up for our newsletter at familywatch.org and understand what's happening all around the world with our free newswire that will come to you. That will be a great tool. But I would say the first place you want to start is in your own home. How do you immunize your children against these assaults? It's been proven. Family dinners, talking to your children, asking them questions, talking to them about sexual things, because nowadays we do have to talk to them, but it needs to be coming from our own parental values and our own family values, and preparing them for what is going to be coming to them at the schools. We're not going to be able to prevent it from coming to them completely, so we need to prepare them. That's number one. Number two, we've tried to create as many tools as possible to help parents fight this agenda. So if you go to stopcsc.org, you've got that documentary. Share the link, share it as far and as wide as you can, but then go to the Defender's Toolkit. If you click on that, the first tool that we have is a Stop CSE plan. And that's a step by step plan that a mom could follow. And first, identifying what's in her school. You need to go to your school, see what's there, what you need to keep out or keep in. If you happen to have good sex ed, that's a good thing. But then you need to join with others. And if you stand alone, it's much harder to do things. But if you educate and inform other parents and organize them, we give you tips on what to do at a school board meeting or a district meeting, the do's and don'ts, even talking points that have been used, the tsunami approach that's been used successfully. And then there's lots of information and tools with PowerPoints. But probably the greatest tool we have is the USA map. It's a Stop CSE USA map. If you go to Stop CSE and click on the top again, you'll find the USA map. Click on your state, and you'll find what your state laws are relating to this, even whether you have a state obscenity exemption or not. You'll find the curriculum that's been federally funded by the US government. Every year, there's Planned Parenthood entities in your states getting grants and all their allies, and they're trying to come in as guest speakers and getting it to your children. So you can find the exact amount of money they got, which entities got it, what the programs are that they're teaching. Then you click on those programs, and we'll even have an analysis of those for you. They'll be analyzed and scored 15 out of 15 or 12 out of 15, depending on how many harmful elements they have. We even have PowerPoints with depictions of what's in the curriculum that you can take to the school board and show them. The greatest tool that we've ever had that always seems to work if you want to remove comprehensive sexuality education is to simply show them the manuals, show them what's there. And usually, more than often than not, good people will stand up and join you, and they'll root them out. And
Yeah.
that's the most successful way to do it, is to actually show the curriculum to all the parents and make the public aware of it.
That is that is so encouraging. And we have Stop CSE website linked on our m4lu.org under the resource library in our toolkit for this month. But the toolkit on stopcsc.org is fantastic. Please check it out. It's absolutely incredible. And I think that is so true for so one standing get preparing your family. Really we need to take care of our kids at home, right? One of the things we all know we talk about, pulling your kids out of school or whatever, but and it's not for everyone. It can't work for everyone, but you have to remember like you can't send your kids into war all the time. I mean, some of this is legitimately a war and you have to be able to look at those battle lines and see where it's drawn. But if you can fight, because something I will encourage every parent, grandparent, citizen, someone who doesn't have kids right now, or they might have them in the future, or maybe their kids are all adults, the thing that's important to remember why this is so critical for us all to be involved is because we're still living in the society where these kids are getting taught. So you will be impacted. Whether or not you think you're impacted now, you're going to be impacted at some point in time because today's children and students will be tomorrow's legislators. And we need to be very, very vigilant to protect them because if we as Christians or Bible believing anyone who is religious and has good values remove ourselves from society, from politics, then that void will be filled with something that doesn't have the same values as us very clearly. So, well, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you both coming on, and Sharon especially coming on in the middle of the night. Really appreciate you joining us from Turkey. Let me give you a chance to say any final statements, any thoughts or anything you'd like to share, and then where people can find you each. And Sharon, I'll start with you.
Yeah, anyone within the sound of my voice, when I got involved in this cause, I was a mom. I had no experience, never been involved politically, never been involved in the PTA, even there, I'm embarrassed to say. But what I learned was very quickly is that one person can have a big impact. And I've seen this over and over and over again, where if one person speaks up, usually people will join you, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So I just want to just really emphasize the power that everyone listening has to do good in this area and to protect children, and the power of prayer. Our organization is a non-religious organization. We take our positions based on social science data and medical facts and what proves to bring the best outcomes for men, women, and children. But personally, I am a Christian, and I believe in prayer, and I know that with God's help that you will be led to do what you can do in your sphere of influence, and that your efforts can be magnified 100 times, 1,000 times. I'm shocked at all the good that, even like here we have Audrey, when she went to Uganda, and all the good she was able to do. Just one person who agreed to go do that. And then, second of all, just please use our resources. Go to familywatch.org, sign up for our newsletter. Go to stopcsc.org, because so much work has gone in to preparing all of these things just for you, to help you to protect your own children and the children around you.
Thank you so much. Audrey, any final thoughts?
Um, Yeah, and Sharon's been doing a great job of promoting all the websites. I haven't said mine once. So it is Matthew18.org. So you can go to my website. The presentation I did to Uganda Parliament, a presentation I did at a seminary to seminarian students. So and then resources are on there as well. So feel free to check out our website, and my book is also available on our website as well. Um, I just want to encourage you that with God, all things are possible. And I know, it looks pretty bad right now, but we're seeing a shift. I took a busload of people to the state capitol. And I've started an event because I looked at each state, threw out God's law, and brought in the Kinsey-based model penal code, which removed protections for marriage of women and children in every state. So I said, okay, let's start going to the Capitol. We found the room that the Texas legislators made that decision. So every year we go in there and we pray for God to restore his law in America. And it's going to start in that courtroom. It's going to spread across our Capitol building, across the state, and across America. And I will tell you that the ground was shaking. I mean, God was present we just did it on Friday, May 16th. And it was amazing. It was amazing. There is a seismic shift coming, but we've got to be calling out to God, and we've got to be this is a God-sized problem. No one individual can't do it, but God can use one individual. Like I said, in Uganda, God can use one person, but it takes us saying, okay, Lord, let me, like Gideon, we have to clean up our own family first. We have to not be watching, graphic shows. We can't be in pornography. We got to get out of that. We've got to be right with the Lord. And then we can turn around and raise up the next generation. And I say to our kids today, I say, you guys are under more attack than any previous generation. But I believe that Satan's working so hard on you guys because you're the generation that's going to bring this nation back. And start commissioning them. They are made in the image and likeness of God. They are either male or female as he created them, and we need to emphasize that. So the Bible has a lot to say on all the moral issues that are out there right now. We just got to get back and get knowledgeable about God's word on these things too.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And we dropped the link to both websites in the chat, so everyone should be able to get to them. Please go and visit these incredible websites. There's so many good resources there for all of you to help in this fight. And thank you both so much for joining us, Audrey and Sharon. We really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Missy, for your leadership in this
Yes.
and your organization's desire to help parents fight this battle. We're so grateful.
Mhm.
We're not giving up. We're going to fight
That's
hard.
right.
That's right.
Amen.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. This has been the M4LU virtual watch party of the war on children, which it is. It is a war on our children today, but we can fight back. Uh, as we had some amazing resources presented tonight. I'm so excited. Of course, m4lu.org has a resource library with a toolkit specifically for each month that we're facing or topic that we're covering each month. And we have our CSE toolkit up there live for you to be able to access. And a lot of those resources are the ones that were mentioned tonight because, frankly, they're phenomenal. They're so good. So go and check out Matthew18.org. And that is Matthew and the number 18, not the Roman numerals, but the number 18.org. And then stopcsc.org are the two main ones that you're going to want to check out, in addition to m4lu.org, of course. So far, just a quick recap, we have had CSE 101. You can catch all of these, by the way, on the Moms for Liberty YouTube channel. We had an incredible kickoff to the month with Rebecca Ose from CFAM and Monica Klein from It Takes a Family. It was a fantastic evening. And then, of course, Erin Brewer spoke as well, talking about just introducing us all to comprehensive sexuality education overall. Then last week, we had Kelly Shankoski and Seth Gruber on CSC 102. Tonight was our watch party. And next week, on the 29th, so the day after Memorial Day, when you guys are all relaxing, hopefully, and recovering from wonderful weekends, we'll be doing our book club discussion with You're Teaching My Child What, featuring author Dr. Miriam Grossman. And this is a really, really impactful book. I strongly encourage you to check it out. It's an easy read. It's very, very easy to understand. And if you don't have a ton of time, although I will say the audiobook in particular was really good for it. I listen to most of my stuff on audio. But on our website, if you go to m4lu.org and check out this event, we have a number of book reviews that also do a quick recap on it. So thank you all again for joining us. Please consider becoming a member to support Moms for Liberty. And of course, as was famously said by James Madison, the advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only true guardian of liberty. That is the mission of M4LU and why we are here today. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.